Good morning. Welcome to my kitchen and to the continuation of a tertiary world. Today I begin reading from the first of 7 east-west streets that make up the grid of 14 streets. I've just completed the 7 north-south streets, each of which consisted of 7 stories, 7 memories that arose as I walked down these streets in 2008. This is the first of the east-west streets. Its colour is red, it's Victoria Street, and this is the corner of Victoria and William Street, the first memory. 3 days after we arrive here from Trieste, my mother is offered her first job as a sales assistant in a North Melbourne pharmacy. The owner chemist is John Napoli, a distant acquaintance of a friend of our landlord. My mother is delighted but anxious. She's 30 years old. In the following months, I happen to pick up, during the evening chit-chatter, after our sparse dinners, fragments of my parents' conversations. And within those fragments, I single out the shards and splinters of my mother's first impressions of her working life in Australia. From these fragments, I get a sense that an alien orderliness pervades her world outside our home. But within the order, she also senses the presence of a deep vacuousness. It signals the first appearance, though barely registrable, of the ill-fitting melancholy that will permeate each single in-breath the 4 of us will take from now on. She does not articulate it, and perhaps she can't, but it manifests its impermeable chill in the way her sentences sometimes remain unfinished. Halfway through expressing a thought, she looks up, usually at the window, as though the animating principle of her experiences has just moved beyond reach. Perhaps I reason as I write this, it's all a projection of mine and I'm simply reconstructing a past reality from all that I have gathered from within my own memory since that day. Perhaps, or perhaps not. I will never know which of these 2 possibilities informs my recall. Right at this moment, I believe it's sharp and clear and unhurried, uninhibited by any consideration other than to acknowledge what I can see before my closed eyes. Yet another memory surfaces, this time more specific. One day my mother takes me to work with her. I'm not well, and she can't afford to stay at home to look after me, nor does she want to leave me on my own. After I arrive at the pharmacy with her, I'm told to sit in the back room. Here in the gloom, I breathe in all the mysterious fragrances chemist shops then exuded. And I have ample time to examine the shelves packed with containers of all sizes. As I scrutinize the various labels on the stacked cardboard boxes, I'm suddenly asked to perform a task. Mr. Napoli appears and takes me into the tiny triangular backyard, all asphalt and iron, and points to a huge stacked pile of cardboard boxes and then to an incinerator. Burn them all, he tells me in a no-nonsense way, and don't come back in till you do. He then pushes a box of matches into the palm of my hand and walks back into the room. This attitude is the product, I realised many years later, of having been brought up as a working-class migrant during the war years in Australia. This understanding is at this point, of course, beyond me. I stand frozen in the backyard looking at the incinerator, realising that I have never burnt anything in my life. After many attempts, a piece of shredded cardboard somehow lights up, and soon the leaping flames provide for me a kind of catharsis as the box's fragments fly high up in a North Melbourne sky and lose themselves beyond the roof of St Mary's across the road. Now I can't seem to find enough boxes to burn, and within 15 minutes the yard is cleared. Mr. Napoli comes out to see how I'm progressing, and a wry smile breaks out on his Mediterranean face. "Good boy," he says. "Bravo." From behind his back, he produces an open bottle of Coca-Cola. "Drink this," he orders with a wink. Burning boxes is hot work. He goes back inside. I sit on a wooden box and hold the bottle in both hands. I take very small sips, all the while watching, while I savour each one, that I'm not consuming the precious liquid too quickly. How do you do that, I ask myself? How do you keep preciousness intact while simultaneously consuming it? Later that afternoon, Mr. Napoli brings out a copy of the Herald and shows me the editorial. "Read this," he exhorts. "This is where our future has been decided. Don't ever forget to read this and then tell your mum and dad what's happening here in this country." I don't remember what the editorial said that day, of course, but I took the newspaper home with me that evening, and after dinner I proceeded to try and explain its message to my parents. This morning, when I opened the newspaper, I instinctively turned to its editorial page, just like I do each morning. As I write this, it's just started to rain very softly. I have an immense desire to see the roof of St. Mary's from the backyard of Mr. Napoli's pharmacy. And of course, here is a memory of St. Mary's along Victoria Street. St. Mary's. This is what I remember of my first communion, walking out of the confessional and looking up in terror at the bronze figure of a naked and suffering man nailed to a cross. The drama subsequently playing out over and over in my dreams, journeying endlessly through the 14 stations of the Via Crucis, peering in terror into the deep darkness of the confessional, reeling in horror at the hypocrisy that even at this age seemed to me inherent in the ceremony, sensing the uncertainty of my parents' happiness and the certainty of my own delighted relief at having confessed my sins. Then thinking, what did I actually confess? In response, suddenly mistrusting all that the church represented, all it carried, experiencing great joy and walking outside, seeing blue sky and hearing a live bird singing as I crossed the street and left St. Mary's and the melancholy of religious practice behind me, feeling that its practitioners were at this very moment being condemned to dust and mould. Most of all, I remember an acute and incessant desire as I walked across the sunny street towards Aldo's Cafe to eat and drink as much as I could, to feel alive in my young body. To feel alive in my young body. That's a very distant memory. Thank you for listening. Tomorrow I continue with more Victoria Street memories. Hope you have a very lovely day. Until tomorrow.